Okay, one technique that I want to show you using our pinch pot practice pot here is the illusion of dimension. Oftentimes students will want to add something that looks like a paint droplet or honey spilling over the side, or something that has kind of dimension, even clouds or grass or mountains. And so the technique that I'm going to show you right now actually is a good one for kind of giving this illusion that there's been extensive carving work done, but it kind of makes it look much better and a little easier. I'll use the sort of honey drip or paint drop as a example here, but you could apply it depending on what it is that you're trying to do. What I like to do for this is I like to kind of draw it out first. So let's say that I wanted to do kind of a paint droplet, sort of honey kind of vibe going on here. So let's add a little bit of, and I'm just kind of sketching it out casually. Now, one thing to note is that pencil lead actually burns away in the kiln. So if you ever use a pencil to help sketch something out, you're not going to see that lead line later. So I'm pushing in so you can have a little bit of dimension there, but this gives us kind of a start for sort of this sort of honey-like paint droplet situation going on. Now, you're going to do both sort of an additive and subtractive method for both adding clay to the surface and carving away to kind of give the best possible look to what it is we're trying to do. What I like to do in this case is I'll sort of rough up where my let's say honey is. So that kind of slip and score method, I'm just sort of roughing up the surface. What this is going to allow is whatever clay I put there to kind of stick on there and not need to worry that it's going to ultimately kind of come off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some soft clay and just roll it in between my fingers here. And I'm going to create kind of this droplet shape that I've kind of created here. And so you can see I'm kind of just pressing it on the surface. You could put a little bit of water too to make sure that that slip and score process is successful. But I've got my sort of droplet that I'm using my carving lines to help kind of guide. And I'm just pressing it on to the surface. So you could see that that droplet line now looks as if it's actually coming off of the pot. And additionally, I'm also going to use kind of the side of my paintbrush here to kind of carve next to that droplet and remove a little bit of the clay around it. So it's really defining out that droplet line. Your wet paintbrush is a great tool for this because you could smooth out that carve line and really start to define out that shape. So I would keep going with this and make a little coil. Kind of just go around that guide that I've set, and just by carving and blending in the inside of that coil, you could see how as we get going, you're starting to define out this sort of drip mark that could be honey or paint or any kind of extra detail for a three-dimensional object. So you can see I'm pulling out some of that clay in between and letting that clay that's already there start to kind of come on out of the surface. And just these tools here, paintbrush, back of a pencil, front of a pencil, you can see how as you start to add some details, you ultimately can achieve this three-dimensional paint globby look without needing to add the whole thing at one time or needing to fuss too much with doing it all at once. You could do it in little segments, move that coil around, blend it in. And now you could see how pretty easily you're creating different dimensions. So 3-dimensional means it pops out of the surface. And if you keep going around, you could add different dimensions, which makes it look more realistic. So sometimes students say, I want there to be honey down the side, and then they just draw a line and they leave it at that. But if this were a real honey pot and there was really honey dripping over the side, it would actually have dimension. It would actually pop out because the honey would be sitting on top of the pot. So this method of adding these little baby coils and using some of the tools that you've been given can give it a really cool 3-dimensional illusion, as if that honey is actually dripping off of the pot.